Welcome to the show designed to give you crypto confidence. Created by the marketing communications specialists at Blocksparks, we want to help you learn about cryptocurrency and blockchain in a safe and friendly place. Because we believe this stuff is far too exciting to leave it to the geeks. Come and join us to learn more. Hello, Crypto Confidence listeners. It's been a busy couple of weeks in crypto land, isn't it always? But since we last spoke, we've had the announcement of the worst kept secret in the industry that Facebook are launching their own cryptocurrency product. Everyone's trying their best to work out what this is going to mean, as one of the world's biggest private corporations creates their own government-independent currency. As the regulators panic, the commentators comment, prices go a bit crazy, and online searches for Bitcoin and blockchain escalate. We're looking at what we know from what has been released to the public domain and trying to speculate intelligently about what the future social impact might be. It's clear that Project Libra are focusing on the developing world markets initially, and this is important in terms of the changes we can first expect. Those of us lucky enough to live in relatively stable economies have a very different relationship to money compared with people in countries who've experienced hyperinflation and great instability. So to help us make sense of the big picture here, we're joined by software engineer and blockchain enthusiast Jeansy Molanza, who has lived in both South Africa and the UK and truly appreciates the benefits that come with a stable economy and monetary policy. Welcome, Jeansy.
Hi, Maya. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for hosting me today. It's an immense pleasure to be on the show.
It's great to have you with us, and especially we're recording early on a Sunday morning, which is a first for Crypto Confidence, but it's actually beautifully quiet, and it's a fantastic time to be doing this. So it would be great if you could start with just telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey into this crypto blockchain world.
So I was born in Kinshasa, Zaire, which is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. After a couple of months, perhaps in response to the looming war, my parents moved to South Africa. We stayed in Johannesburg for about 15 years, and I spent most of my formative years in South Africa. And then we moved on to the United Kingdom. After completing my master's degree in computer science and management at Loughborough University, it was by chance that I attended a few enterprise-focused talks on blockchain and smart contract. This was in summer 2016.
Okay.
At that time, I don't think any of us in attendance conceptually understood what was being discussed. I want to say that my interest was piqued at that point because it's really hard to give someone an introduction on blockchain from a purely corporate perspective. You almost want to have a narrative of the entire cypherpunk movement, throw in a bit of Hayek, and then let it marinate before introducing the enterprise angle. So I just thought, okay, this is some gimmicky innovation that the corporates are trying to shove on us. I didn't pay much attention to it. Almost a year later, I noticed a lot more people in passing would mention that they own some Bitcoin and they own some Ethereum, and I wasn't even sure what that was. I've heard of Bitcoin, but I didn't really understand, the underworkings of it. And I'm quite a curious person. I like to understand how something works under the hood. So I respected the opinions of a lot of these people, and I thought to myself, let me get involved. So I approached the subject matter from a very skeptical perspective. I was quite cautious. I created an account at a few exchanges. I bought some Bitcoin. I sent it around. And I just I was checking a couple of block explorers to see how the transaction was running, how it moved from one point to another. And I didn't really think it was nothing special. I thought, well, you could do this with a database. So I decided, okay, let me go a bit further. I read the Bitcoin white paper, and later on I came across a paper by Frederick Hayek called Choice and Currency. And that's when everything started to sort of like click together. At this moment, that's when I realized this is actually a 0 to 1 moment. So I started to see Bitcoin as something that was helping me understand what money would be like if we separated it from the notion of government as the sole issuer. And what Hayek helped me appreciate was the benefits of optionality for individuals, particularly in oppressive regimes. So I started to see the right to be able to transact in a currency of your own choosing as one of the fundamental pillars of human liberty. And at that point, my journey began.
Fantastic. It's Absolutely fascinating. I asked that first question to everybody we interview on the show, and everybody's got, nobody, when they were a little kid, knew that they wanted to be a blockchain engineer one day because we
No,
didn't have that concept. Everybody's journey is kind of sideways into it,
yeah,
and people bring whatever experience they've got and knowledge and perspective. And, you're coming very much from the computer science and also the economic perspective.
yeah.
And everybody's got that kind of blinding white light moment when they suddenly got it and realized the potential of it. And not everybody's there yet. Obviously, that's what we're hoping to be part of by creating this show,
Yes.
move more people along that road. But everybody seems to have this revelation moment where they suddenly grasp the potential. I thought, wow. And part of your background to that was obviously the fact that you've experienced living in a wide range of different economic circumstances. And most of our listeners for the show, according to our analytics, which aren't perfect, they tend to be from the US, the UK and Europe. Though we do have numbers popping up from all over the world, from other continents. We haven't got anyone from Antarctica yet, but I think we've got every other continent covered. So please come and join us if you're in Antarctica. That'd be awesome. And it's brilliant to have that diversity growing. But I do know that most of the people listening to this will never have experienced living without a native currency that's pretty stable and predictable. So what you have in terms of your background is a very different perspective on that. What do we need to understand if we've grown up with dollars or euros or sterling? How is the rest of the world different when it comes to money?
So to sort of really appreciate our situation in the developed world, we need to start from the point of understanding what sound money is. One of the properties of sound money that is something that is quite prominent in developed nations is that it's a reliable store of value. It doesn't fluctuate in price over time. So if I'm working, I can rest assured that the amount I'm going to be paid at the end of the month, is going to be enough to see me through, the next month. Or if I want to save it, I have the option to. And there's also another property of money which I like to attribute, and which is issuance by a sovereign authority. So when you live in a first world country, it's quite easy to outsource your trust to a sovereign authority whom you trust to regulate the financial and banking sector. So in the UK, we have the Bank of England, and we have a relative degree of confidence that they're somewhat capable of maintaining monetary and financial stability. So as a result, this makes it possible for us to sort of orientate our decision making towards the future. So at this point, I'd like to introduce this concept called time preference, which kind of hooks in really nicely to this idea of what sound money is. So time preference is basically the extent to which an individual will balance gratifying their present needs versus planning for the future. So the expected future value of money has an impact on your time preference. So if you have a very low time preference, you can delay instant gratification and place priority on future needs. So this really works well when money is better at holding its value. So as an individual, you have the option to dedicate financial resources for usage in the near future. So you can save up for a house, you can save up, buy a car, because you know that the price of the sovereign currency is not going to fluctuate all the time. So as a result, you can accumulate.
Or even long term, you could say for a pension.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can accumulate capital and you can strive towards a general improvement in your living standards, not just for yourself, but for your family to come and so on. So it's easy. It's a lot easier to financially plan in a first world context. On the contrary, a person with a very high time preference is concerned about catering to present needs. So in a country where top-down economic mismanagement is the norm, it is quite difficult to align your financial decisions towards the future. And this situation can be compounded by hyperinflation. So the money you have has a depreciating expected future value. So you either have to spend it straight away, or you have to find a way of exchanging it for a much more premium currency, which obviously comes at a cost to you. So it doesn't make sense to accumulate capital in these type of regions. You have to live for the present. So as a result, the people there find it very difficult to improve their living standards as a whole.
That's something that, I think that we're probably, anybody who's grown up in the developed Western world would find very hard to understand. We expect a little bit of inflation, that, you need to do something with your assets for the long term, that rather than stick it under the mattress, but you don't expect the fact that it's going to fluctuate wildly. or that it could significantly devalue in ways that you can't predict. So that means it's just not worth holding on to. So, okay, it makes a lot more sense then that crypto has made a difference in developing economies. What kind of difference has it made that there is now this optionality to buy Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency with your unstable government currency?
I think what impact it could make is that it would introduce an element of optionality in these countries. At the moment, I would say that crypto hasn't had as much impact as we hoped it would have in a lot of African countries, and as much as a lot of the thought leaders in the space try and sell us this vision of banking the unbanked. There's been little movement in this area. There is still an ongoing dollarization in a number of African countries. So if your sovereign currency is not treating you well, you flock to the dollar, which you can buy from the local market trader. In many areas, cryptocurrency is still viewed with a lot of suspicion. Amongst those people who are interested, there's also a lack of education. So as a result, a number of scams are perpetuated. So, for example, in 2018, there was about a news article came out that about 100,000 or 110,000 Ghanaians lost a total of about 25 million to cryptocurrency scams.
Oh, that's disgusting.
So it's crazy. Adoption seems more opportunistic in these contexts rather than geared towards real world use cases.
Yeah.
I've noticed that there appears to be a general disinterest by projects in the space when it comes to finding an existing network to bootstrap onto within developing economies. There's always more focus on the technology, which makes sense because we're still at the emerging stage, which we're still trying to figure out what works. We're trying to solve bottlenecks like the scalability issue, privacy issues, and so on. But I think going forward, we need to think of cryptos as more like startups. Startups need traction in order to build networks and be of some value to participants. And it's quite difficult to achieve growth, even within the context of a centralized network. How do you accomplish this in a decentralized network with no operator? And it's more complex in the case of crypto, especially in developing economies. You need to think of setting up almost a parallel market that mimics the existing setup. So in Africa, we have a big thing with mobile money agent networks, and they act as gatekeepers to financial services such as M-Pesa by offering the infrastructure at a very low level. Bank branches are really expensive to set up and operate. So I feel like in order for crypto to actually make a difference, we need to sort of be looking at this existing setup and say, okay, cool, we need to be providing person cash in, cash out infrastructure. We need to allow individuals to make basic bill payments, and over time it will start to get steeped in the mindsets of people out there that they have this optionality out there. The agents could be educating the locals about cryptocurrency. So if I could hazard a guess, I would still say that we are still about a decade away from seeing full-blown adoption in these regions. This is just a tentative guess, I would say.
Right. Okay, now that's really interesting. So what's missing then is that infrastructure layer to actually push it out and roll it out.
The tech is there. The tech is there, but we don't have the infrastructure.
We don't have people on the ground to educate and explain and implement it. All right. So, okay, you could say then what's needed is a massive injection of investment, and which brings me to the next thing I would like to talk to you about. Facebook Coin, Project Libra, Zuckbucks, whatever it's going to end up called in popular language. We've all had a look at the white paper this week that we haven't had very long. We're recording on the 23rd of June. And I wanted to put that stake in the ground because this is a very fast moving space and reaction is still unfolding. But based on those first few days of looking at what they've put out there and how people have reacted, Jeansy, what are your first thoughts and expectations?
I'm genuinely excited about the project, but more so because of the discussions that will stem forth from it. We're entering an era, possibly, where a lot of the biggest companies in the world are going to be thinking, okay, I want to launch my own native cryptocurrency, my own network-centric money. For first Facebook, perhaps in a couple of years, Amazon. We don't know how it's going to pan out. If we look at the current situation, we can see that Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram have combined over 1 billion users all over the world. So automatically, with Libra, we have potentially 1 billion people considering new forms of money and starting to really dig in to a new financial ecosystem. And this is exciting.
Absolutely. A billion new crypto
It's
wallets
it,
on the scene.
it's
It's going to be
it's
transformational.
transformational, and like as we've been discussing, we currently have this default position of ascribing our geographic position in the world to the type of money we use. I feel like Libra is going to start to dissect that more as time goes on, and as this conversation unfolds, what efficiencies can we unlock in our global economy in doing so? What happens when we have a truly borderless currency? I feel like Libra is going to bring these conversations out into the space. And it's fascinating that we're seeing Hayek's thought experiment from 30 years ago, in which he argued for a free market in private currencies, actually play out before our eyes. I mean, will it force governments to have a bit more greater incentive to improve their respective sovereign currencies? Because if they don't, they risk losing market share to a new set of competitors.
There's clearly some panic going
Yeah,
on already.
yeah. There's quite a lot of panic because we're in an age where mega corporations have the clout to challenge the government's monopoly over money, and like this is a good thing, even if you are a Bitcoin maximalist and you don't want either side to win, because it introduces competition, and competition is good. And we start to see that the key difference with Libra is that you can opt out of the network if you wish. But it's not that easy with state governed currency. You can't opt out of the British pound. You can't opt out of the euro. So when we start to introduce this optionality in different contexts, it'll be just very interesting to see how it plays out for the
Yeah,
consumer.
definitely. When people manage to make that mental shift to decoupling the currency from the nation, I think the potential is mind blowing.
Yeah.
I've been a bit taken aback, I guess, by some of the reaction this week from the Bank of England, from the European regulators, as though this has been sprung on them, and they must have
They've
known. I
known.
mean, it's
They've
been
known.
the worst kept secret of Facebook's been hiring every blockchain developer in the world for the past year and a half. People must have known this was coming, even if they couldn't get their hands on the details. Does this feel a little bit like panic?
Yeah, I think it does. I think what Libra is doing is that it seems intent on shaping the regulatory landscape. Facebook has the money to hire the lawyers to get their hands dirty, and as a result, a lot of irate politicians have to deal with it. And I feel like this is what's causing them a massive headache. And it's great. I think we need to have this dialogue. I think for too long the governments have looked at cryptocurrency as maybe a very niche asset, and they thought to themselves, well, we don't have to worry about it. But normally these
We
things.
can just crush it with regulation, and
Exactly,
it won't really get in
exactly,
our face. Then.
exactly.
Yeah.
But when you start having big companies now getting into the space and introduce products that could be systemic, could pose some sort of systemic risk, you're forced to deal with it, and you don't want to come across as and it's quite interesting because you don't want to be the country which says, oh, we're banning Libra in a developed context, because then if someone else says, oh well, we're pro Libra,
Yeah.
you're kind of
Come on
you're
in.
like, come on
Yeah.
in, come over to us. You're kind of like, oh, are we losing out on an economic opportunity by saying that we're banning all forms of private market money? So yeah, there's a lot of considerations to be made. But I
Yeah.
feel like the panic is a bit overstated. They've known, like you said, they've known that this was coming for a while. It shouldn't have been a surprise, and they should have been working to get the necessary regulation ready. But we'll see this develop over the next few years, and it should be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, let's get the popcorn on now because this is going to be fascinating to sit back and observe.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it feels like it could almost be a second chance for the US to regain some
Yes.
ground on a regulatory
Yes.
basis. For the last couple of years, it's been all about everybody's moving to Malta or
Yeah.
Estonia or the Marshall Islands or wherever because they're out-regulated by the BIT license and the SEC. Maybe this is a chance now for the US to actually get on board
Yeah. Yeah.
and recover some ground. So it'll be so interesting just to see how the regulation plays out and those who get it and grasp the
Definitely.
potential, those who see only a threat and those who can work creatively with it. And actually, maybe it's impossible not to see the threat once you get it. It's a bit like both of us having those moments where you realize what could happen. If you're a state regulator of a reserve bank, then you're bound to feel the ground shifting just a little bit this week, I suppose, one way or another. So Is this a cryptocurrency?
With cryptocurrencies, the predominant view is that it has to be decentralized, permissionless, and allow for a certain degree of privacy in transactions. So if you look at Libra, it doesn't have any of these qualities. It's being governed by an association. We don't know how Facebook is planning to use any sort of financial transaction data associated, with the platform. They've said that they won't associate it with any user profiles and henceforth. But I think that they're smart enough to probably decouple the data and figure out, how the financial data could map to the user profiles without bringing them together in any way. So it's a bit of a gray area at the moment. So because Libra doesn't have any of these qualities, one could argue that it is in effect just a digital currency. But if you look at the underlying protocol from a technical perspective, you see that there is some scope for it to become decentralized and more permissionless over time. But this is subject to the direction taken from the Libra Association. But I feel like, some compromise is required for any mainstream adoption of blockchain technology. Initially, this might not be as revolutionary as we hope, but I feel like it could change some public sentiment towards cryptocurrency and catapult Bitcoin further into the mainstream once we're out there and in front of people's faces and they're forced to deal with it in a particular way.
Yeah, it's quite interesting what they haven't said or pinned down, what they haven't actually promised to set in stone at this point from the white paper that's been published this week. I've worked on a lot of white papers for token sales and different projects, and it's all about promising the moon, quantifying it, having a roadmap that is, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, even though we haven't actually worked out the technology to do it, but we're going to deliver on the. And actually, it's almost refreshing. I didn't want to find myself saying this to read somebody saying, well, we expect to have this by 12 months, 18 months down the road. We're setting up this foundation and we work out what the governance is going to be. We're not setting that in stone either. So I think there is this kind of, maybe you need to be big and powerful enough as Facebook to be comfortable with that degree of ambiguity.
Of course. It's what comes with it's one of the benefits of having power on the international scene and having a large social graph, a large network of individuals who are consistent users of your application. People will notice straight away, and I think it's different from all these ICO projects that we're seeing because. With what we're seeing in the space to date, none of the projects could obviously enter the market at the scale that Facebook is. So that's the key difference, and it's exciting. It's actually fantastic, and it's good because it will shake the crypto sort of currency space a bit. Because if Libra is out there, then we'll start looking at a lot of these altcoins and a lot of these tokens coming out with a bit more scrutiny because the standard has been set for like a sort of like a side piece to the Bitcoin and Ethereum heavyweights. So
yes, I think at the moment people do have that sense that what do I compare this to? How do I evaluate a crypto asset? In terms of what it's really worth, and do I benchmark it against Bitcoin or against the dollar? This could almost be the kind of third place that you could evaluate against something that is basically a stable coin, so backed by assets, not quite a cryptocurrency because it's not permissionless, it's not decentralized in the same way, but maybe it could provide almost a kind of, not a bank of last resort, but a kind of a yardstick of last resort. I don't know, thinking out loud, which is never a good idea this time in the morning. But it's the more you think about this and the more you talk about it, I think the one thing I keep coming back to is, oh my God, it's going to change everything.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the only certainty. How much is up for grabs here? Okay, that's really interesting. Now, this week, we've obviously seen some major price action with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. Do you think that Libra coin, or I can't remember exactly what they're going to call their token itself, but will it compete against Bitcoin? Do you think it's actually going to affect pricing in the market for Bitcoin and established coins?
I don't really think Libra will compete against Bitcoin. I think it will raise a lot of interest in Bitcoin. because it's almost like the gateway for many people into the cryptocurrency space. But I don't see it as competing because I don't think both projects are on a collision course. And I feel like, as we've discussed, their combined existence allows the overarching discussion to progress simultaneously on different fronts. If you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin has a very conservative long-term outlook, and which reinforces its ideology of money with no strings attached. When you're transacting with Bitcoin, Bitcoin doesn't care who you are. It doesn't tell you who you can and who you can't transact with. It doesn't try and freeze your funds. Bitcoin can't be easily shut down. So, you have this very, very different view of money, and that is being reinforced by concepts related to self-sovereignty when you look at Bitcoin, my keys, my Bitcoin type of thinking. Whereas if you look at Libra, like we've discussed, it looks intent on shaping the regulatory landscape for Bitcoin to strive.
So Bitcoin can follow into the
Exactly.
space that Libra helps carve out.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. That does seem to explain some of the price action
Yeah.
we've seen this
Yes.
week. There's just been this surge of interest, even in the mainstream media,
Yes.
people trying to comment on and talk about it. Do you think that will improve the dialogue and understanding of crypto then over as Libra unfolds? Will we all get better explanations from our media?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of press outlets like the Financial Times have been quite pessimistic about the outlook of
Yeah.
cryptocurrency in general. So I'm quite keen for them to sort of be proven wrong in a sense through Libra. And maybe a lot of the I like to read through the comment sections of a lot of these articles that pop up, and it's so much pessimism and so much.
Oh, never read the comments.
I find
the bottom half of the internet.
I find it fascinating. Especially with papers like the Guardian and the Financial Times, where you expect the outlooks to be quite what's the word for it? Quite well thought through, but some of the
and maybe progressive
exactly.
and forward looking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been reading through it throughout the whole week now, and it's just fascinating. A lot of people just don't get it.
They still don't get. Well, the outlets and correspondents don't get it. The BBC is still saying so-called cryptocurrencies in inverted commas whenever they mention Bitcoin.
I mean, it's not okay. It's not okay. I mean, I think it just shows how little people are willing to sort of contribute mentally or intellectually to the space and really grapple with what's going on here. The reality of the situation is that financial service organizations will be at risk going forward with Libra, because it's going to be possible to now completely sidestep them in everyday transactions. And
that's financial institutions right up to reserve banks and nation states, and it's huge.
Exactly. I mean, if I wanted to send my cousin in South Africa some money, I mean, what incentive post Libra would I have to use Western Union, MoneyGram, or TransferWise? If we both have WhatsApp, I can transfer the funds very quickly in the midst of conversation with him, and that's the usability argument that I feel is left out of the dialogue. A lot of people attack it from a technical perspective. They attack it from a very narrow economical perspective as well, but they never think about the usability of the platform that is being rolled out. What benefits it could give to everyday people like you and I.
Yeah, and usability is obviously the huge adoption barrier right now.
It is.
And we create a lot of content at BlockSparks and Crypto Confidence just about the really basics of how to set up your wallet, how to buy your first bit of cryptocurrency safely and not get ripped off or make a mistake. And if you could put the simplicity of WhatsApp on top of that, that's the thing.
That's a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, if that means another 2-3 billion people can suddenly send crypto as easily as sending a text message, then everything's going to change. So, okay, I mean, that's great for the banks, for the governments. Everybody's going to have to roll with this and take it on board, and they're going to have to respond to it one way or another. But what about users? What about people on the ground? Is it going to be good or bad? What about the users in unstable local economies? What about the users in South Africa?
I think in countries where with an unstable um, local economy, I feel like it could be a liberator.
Mm,
Um, it's quite clear that the democratic control of currencies has always been a mixed success.
yes,
Um, if Libra works as planned, we will see millions of people flocking, you know, to this new alternative and sending money across borders as easily as to send a text message. So it's great. It's great on the ground, but we have to figure out the mechanics of what this Libra coin is actually going to look like before we become entirely optimistic about it. And um, there is a risk involved with this development because you could see that nation states are disrupted and weakened as a
mm,
result of that, and as a unintended outcome, you could see a new powerful corporate layer of monetary control being introduced between central banks, individuals, and the government. And the question at this point is, will these companies now put the public's interests ahead of their own? So the whole the
definitely.
whole the whole
Yeah.
purpose of a company or a mega corporation is shareholder profit maximization. Now,
Mm.
and how does this approach look like when you're dealing with a service that is meant to be managed for the public good? Sometimes the public good might be in direct conflict to the shareholders' good. How do we manage that? So it's good.
Yeah. And will all the public be treated
Exactly,
equally?
exactly. We don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like. There's also a lot of questions I have around insurance. In a black swan event where the Libra association is made insolvent, am I entitled to any compensation from the
Yeah.
financial services compensation scheme? What happens to my money? Um, you know, there's a compliance question as well. How is Facebook going to be handling individuals who in these unbanked regions? Because normally, what you find with these individuals is that they're considered to be a KYC or anti-money laundering risk. So
Yes.
how's that going to work? How are we going to onboard these individuals? And
Definitely. There's still a big gap in
yeah,
everything that I've read of how people get into
yeah.
Libra if they're unbanked.
Mm. Yeah, it's not clear. It's not clear. Yeah, I see a lot of filters being put in place to actually manage this platform over time, and we can't have transactions being made to sanctioned countries, for example, such as Iran, and
Yeah.
automatically that cuts out a lot of the people we've been speaking about who need access to an alternative choice of currency. They've been under terrible regimes that they're completely detached from. They're living their individual lives, but is Libya going to benefit them in any capacity? So there's many questions. But I think it's too early to be critical.
It is, but I think we have to be
We have to be
watchful, I
watchful.
guess,
Yeah,
rather than critical
yeah,
at this point. But I
yeah,
think what you said about, the risks of the power of this
yes,
corporation or even the foundation that ultimately governs it, I think in regions of the world where the economy is unstable, there are often a great many other
yeah,
instabilities, political, all kinds of resources. And, in the worst case scenario, you could see Libra bringing down governments and provoking wars because people are so afraid of ceding that
yeah.
control. And will there be any kind of control over the actions of this foundation in terms of pulling back from whatever path they're pursuing if it's going to actually put lives at risk?
Mm,
And so far, I haven't seen anybody kind of talking about that. Again,
mm.
maybe it's a case of not grasping yet what it could
Yes,
mean.
yes, yes. We're still in the early stages, so the long-term intentions that Facebook have with Libra have been vaguely communicated. All they've said is that they're going to give up control at this point next year. So
Yeah.
going forward, we don't know.
It's just kind of PR at the
Yeah,
moment, isn't it?
yeah,
Rather than governance. And
yeah.
maybe we just got to wait for more flesh on the bones, particularly as Facebook obviously has huge trust issues.
Yes.
And that's one for us in the developed world more, I think.
Hmm.
I don't suppose somebody striving to feed their family in Iran really cares about
Uh,
Cambridge Analytica
no, I
and
don't.
targeted
No,
ads.
I don't think they give much mind to that either. So yeah, um, I think it's a different set of problems for different contexts, and I
Yes.
think part of what's going to be very interesting over time is how these different jurisdictions deal with Libra, and it's going to make for a lot of interesting, discussions politically particularly on the global sphere. And
Yes.
yeah,
And will it be truly global? It'd be really interesting to see the Libra Foundation in a year's time. Will there be representation from Russia, China,
exactly. Yeah.
and places that are completely closed off in lots of ways?
Yeah.
The whole China question is fascinating anyway
Yeah.
because of their
Yeah.
currently the Great Firewall and blocking of Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, it seems unlikely. It seems more a case of we'll have another Maduro situation where these countries introduce their own uh, cryptos to compete against Libra and henceforth, because uh, they don't want to be part of the global forum. But we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see.
I mean, you could say China's already streets
Yeah,
ahead in electronic
yeah,
payment terms
yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah. Definitely, definitely. I mean, but they're doing a lot of scary stuff with it, and that's the kind of
Yeah,
stuff we need to be mindful of over here as lead. Yeah,
absolutely. Just the social graph connected to the money and the access to resources
yeah.
is a potentially scary thing. And I think people need to have a look at what's going on in China before they think about Facebook managing their access to their money.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
I suppose we just need to keep talking about
Yeah,
it, bringing it out into the light, asking the
yeah,
questions, and holding people to account as best we can politically and in terms of the media. It's going to be an interesting ride, though.
yeah. And we're here, and it's happening in our lifetime. It's very exciting
Yeah.
to be in the midst of all this, and we should be genuinely grateful that
What a time to be
exactly,
alive.
exactly. I mean, it kind of feels like, I was too young to see the inception of the internet and see
Right.
how it developed. But being here for this journey, especially, for a lot of millennials is really going to be, especially as we consider to be quite progressive and quite willing to try new things and buck the status quo. We don't know what the world is going to look like 10 years from now as a result of these developments. We never know. And I guess that's the exciting thing, especially when you have all these interesting things happening right in front of you, right before your eyes, and you have the ability to sort of engage with it and take part in it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, even to shape
Even to
it, it's
shape it,
more
yeah,
democratic.
exactly.
That the fact that somebody can access
Yeah,
this potentially on an Android phone in the middle of an African
yeah,
desert, in the same way as you could in Silicon Valley.
yeah, definitely, definitely.
That's incredibly powerful. And I think you're absolutely right. It's revolutionary. Not everybody is seeing the potential yet. Nobody can see what it's actually going to look like. But one by one, people are waking up to the possibilities
Yeah.
and the scope of it in exactly the same way. You see, I'm not a millennial, and I went through this once already.
Yeah.
Didn't manage to make loads of money from it or anything, but it's one of those things you look back and think, well, I grew up before we had the internet,
Yeah.
and then we did, and the world has changed beyond all recognition.
Yes.
It's going to happen again, and there's a chance now for everybody to be part of that, because the internet thing happened so gradually, because there wasn't the infrastructure to push out the information, and whereas now everybody's already got that layer. This can happen on an exponentially faster and more dramatic scale. This next revolution is going to be even more transformational. We just don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet.
That's the most exciting bit.
It is. You're right. It's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be a storyteller in this space and to be observing it. And you're working in the development layer and building it and bringing it out to the world. So this has been a really interesting conversation. It's made me even more excited about the future. I think optimistic is the right word, but also just kind of grasping sort of what the possibilities are. I think we should be a little bit afraid as well as excited.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Because
Yeah.
there are things outside our control, and things could change in ways that we can't begin to predict. But we'll keep talking about it. We'll keep an eye on it. Maybe you could come back later on, further down the line in Libra, and we can have a look and reflect on this conversation.
I mean, we can think about what we got right and what we got wrong. I mean, it's always great to reflect on these things. And I'd be happy to.
Fantastic. Jeansy, what's the best way for people to learn more about your work and your events?
Mainly, I'm quite active on Twitter. So at Jeansy Molanza. So that's the best way to reach me. If you have any questions, you want to get in touch, you want to just talk, grab a coffee, I'm more than happy to. But Twitter is generally my
that's where you're at.
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. It was via Twitter that we were first introduced. So everything happens on social media, not necessarily Facebook. But Jeansy, thank you ever so much for joining Crypto Confidence today.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Crypto Confidence. If you like what you hear, please do consider leaving us a review via your favourite podcasting app and joining the conversation online in whichever way you prefer. Full contact details are in the show notes for this episode. And remember, nothing in this podcast or our related social media, nor anything else published by Blocksparks OU at any location, is intended as financial, investment or trading advice. Everything we write or say represents our personal opinions for your information, education and entertainment only. You should not make any decisions based on anything we share with you, not without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with appropriate professional advisors. Crypto Confidence is all about being smart and informed and making the right choices for you.